Hi, this is Annie Grace, and welcome to This Naked Mind podcast. And today I have a really special guest. Rachel is with me, Rachel Hind. Hi, Rachel.
Hello, Annie.
You are waking up so bright and early for this podcast from all the way across the globe. Thanks for being up at 5:30 to do this. And you look so fresh for 5:30 in the morning.
Like what I said, I think one of the benefits of not drinking is that you do wake up quite early. So, this was not a problem getting up at this time. I'm super excited to be a guest on your podcast.
Oh, that's great. That's so cool. So why don't you, walk us sort of all the way back to the beginning for you, like in your drinking life. What did it all start? What did that look like?
Yeah, let's go back and look at my story. Like what I've said, I've listened to a lot of your podcasts and I relate to a lot of it, but a lot of people started back in, uni or sort of earlier times in their teenage years. Whereas me, I sort of didn't really start until my 20s or 30s, sort of 20s, late 20s, 30s, where I just finished uni. I had qualified as a lawyer and accountant and had started working in banking and finance. So it was the times pre-GFC when it was the times of expense cards. It was the times of you celebrated success with the client by going out with the client. You celebrated winning a deal by going out drinking. It was just part of the culture, part of the banking culture. I think similar to your story, Annie.
Very much, yeah.
Yeah, it was, I was working for an investment bank at the time, and it was just, it was that work hard, play hard attitude. So that's when it really started. And it was, long hours, stressful long hours, followed by booze-fueled events, really. And it was very much part of the culture. So that's sort of where it started. So I would say probably late 20s, early 30s. And I don't think it started off as a problem. It was fun. It was social use. I was enjoying it. I was having a great time. So there was no way I would have associated myself with having a drinking problem. When it really started is when I had children, and when I saw the drinking was turning from the events, the work events, to habitual drinking at home. So I think, again, similar to your story, Annie, I saw it start to leak over, and from the research I know now, it's because I was getting hooked on having alcohol. So I was having it probably 1 to 2 nights with work events, and then the other nights when I wasn't at work events, I was drinking at home. So it turned to habitual drinking at both at work and at home, and then it was the stress of being a working mum. I think it was, as a working mum, you're trying to juggle all those balls, and you're trying to juggle all those balls to perfection and not get overwhelmed. and I think I was getting overwhelmed and not really handling the stress, and obviously turning to alcohol. So, but I was fully functioning. So I was starting to think, I was drinking too much, but I was what you would be classified as fully functioning. I was still maintaining a good job, still doing well in my job, running 2 kids, still doing my exercise, still going to the gym. So, outwardly I was fully functioning. But inside I was suffering. So inside I was suffering. I had massive anxiety. And as I know now, Annie, with your work, that the whole I'd feel good for the night I was drinking, and then the next day and probably the next 3 to 5 days, because as you've told us in all the research, that dynorphin chemical kicked in, which is a lot longer than the kick you get from the dopamine that you get from the alcohol. So my anxiety was bad for 3 to 5 days after, whereas my drinking, I was only having fun for 3 to 5 hours. So the alcohol was like pouring gasoline on my anxiety. It was just igniting it. Yeah. So, and I was probably back then, I wasn't one of these drinkers that was, a regular drinker. I was a binge drinker. So I could go days without drinking, and then I would drink 2 bottles of wine a night. The nights I was drinking, the nights I decided I was drinking 2 bottles of wine. I was drinking vodka Red Bulls to try and stay up even longer. And it was even often, if I was at work events, there was often other recreational drugs that were happening. So it was more the binge rather than the consistent drinking for me.
And so like every, how would it be, I guess, just to talk more about that, because I feel like that's something that, a lot of people, because it wasn't, my story was consistent drinking. And I feel like when you're on the side of consistent drinking, you can have the story in your head that's like, well, at least I'm not, falling down the stairs. And then when you're binge drinking, you have the story in your head, well, at least I'm not drinking every single night, right? And really basically on the same principles. It's just sort of different mechanisms. But can you give a little more like flavor or information on, how that was for you? Like, was it every time you would binge, you're like, all right, not again. And then we kind of build up and you'd find yourself back there? Or was it pretty like, okay, I'm going to just binge on the weekends? Or, how was that cycle for you?
And the cycle was bad because I think the quantity you drink. So the sheer quantity, having 2 bottles of wine and then followed by vodkas, like it was when I'd binge, I'd literally binge so that I didn't want to go to bed. So I didn't want the night to end. So I would just push on and push on and push on until, like you say, I would be suffering blackouts. I'd push on often until I would pass out. So it was not because I didn't do it regularly. It was that when I decided to do it, it was going to be a big event. And so I think because the high was so high that, what I was doing, the alcohol was giving myself so much, the low was so low. I was stuck in that cycle of, alcohol, guilt, anxiety, self-loathing, self-sabotage, repeat. Like I would have a few days, start to sort of feel better, and then it would be the cycle would repeat again. But the guilt and the anxiety and the shame, self-loathing were immense because I think I was drinking so much, and then so that with the high I got the low.
Yep, absolutely.
So I don't, like you say, you don't know which one's better. I think they're both, the consistent versus the binge.
Yeah, and I think they're both like equally destructive. It's just funny because it's one of the many sort of things we tell ourselves. So I'm not that bad because I'm not in that boat or this boat,
I knew I was bad because I was always the destructive one to my friends, like the one that would, if I wanted to drink, I would pull everyone else around me to drink and to drink to excess. So I was being the destructive one. I could see that I was being the destructive one because I wasn't liking myself, because of the self-loathing and the self-sabotage. It was self-destruct. So I got, I sort of felt like the anxiety was just getting so immense. And then I sort of had a aha moment. I got some blood tests and, like I'm a pretty fit and healthy. I considered myself back then a fit and healthy person. I got some blood tests and I had elevated liver enzymes, which was purely as a result of drinking. So I I got the bad blood test. I had psoriasis, which is a skin inflammation, which is very related to stress and often caused by drinking. And I had very severe psoriasis and had been advised by my doctor that that was related to the stress, which was very related to the drinking. So I had that, and then it was just my anxiety, and I just knew that I had to break this 20-year habit. It had to go. It just had to go because it was really starting to negatively impact my life, my self-love, and just my anxiety, my constant anxiety. And I just knew that it was time to go. I think having the health results from my doctor, I think the anxiety got so immense, and it was just that this has got to stop. And so where did I get support? I started this back probably 4 years ago. So there wasn't as much out there as what there is now, but I did the AA and the 12-step and went to go to the 12-step process. And I really struggled with that in the sense that I found it hard to call myself an alcoholic. I know now I know I was a problem drinker, but I found it hard to label myself an alcoholic. So I tried then, where was a big turning point, and it was actually interesting. I was listening to Rachel Hart and her story, and she said that she found Smart Recovery, and I found Smart Recovery. So that was when I had the big turning point. That Smart Recovery worked for me because it is using CBT's cognitive behavioral technique. And what I see it as is that you intercept your behavior. So you intercept your thoughts and feelings so that you change the outcome. So I would get a trigger, and then typically I'd then go and justify that trigger and then take action and go and drink. But what I had to learn to do through CBT techniques is have a trigger, and then my justification, I had to pause. I had to really pause and think about the consequences before I took the action. Mm-hmm. And I'd never done that. It was always trigger, justification, action, all in a matter of nanoseconds. So I'd never paused to think about the consequences of me following through on my trigger. Mm-hmm. And I think CBT really gave me that ability to pause before I took action and actually think through the consequences of me taking a certain action, action of going down the drinking path versus the action of not drinking.
That's great.
I always think of the term push fast forward. So don't think, I learned to not think where I am now, to push fast forward to the next day, the next year, the next 3 years, of me taking that action now. So that's where SMART worked, and that's why I find it's really good because it makes you consider your consequences when you're actually in that moment.
And what does that process, just for people who are like, oh, that sounds interesting, I want to try that out. Like, what does that look like in the moment when you are, so you walk in somebody where you're planning not to drink, and somebody says, hey, have a glass of wine. Like, what does that look like? What do you do?
So I always justify, and I actually got this from Jack Canfield because I did one of his courses, and I really like him and his success principles. I always think of it in my head, and I as he uses the equation E plus R equals O, and E equals the event. So the event is always going to be fixed. Or static. So think of an event saying you catch up with you catch up with your friends. You walk into a bar, you catch up with your friends. That's always going to happen. You can't change the event. You can't change, the E. And then the plus R, so the R equals your reaction, your responsibility, how you react. And how you react to the event will equal, the O equals outcome. So how you will react will equal the outcome, but the event won't change. So for example, so if I walked into my friends are all around drinking at a bar, that's an event. That's not going to change. I can't change the event. How I react. So I could react by sitting there going, oh, I'm feeling really nervous. I want to fit in. I'm going to have a drink. What my outcome could be, it could be, most of the times it's going to be negative consequences because I'm going to have the drink and I know I'm going to get the anxiety the next day. I'm going to get the guilt, the shame, the self-loathing. I don't sleep well. That's going to be the outcome from me having that drink. Event is just the friends in the bar. If I react differently and I react by actually sticking to my values, sticking what I know works for me, and saying no, and knowing what I know now and that I don't need to drink to fit in, I just say, no, I'm okay not having a drink, I'm fine. I'll have a mocktail. The outcome is a positive one because of that, how I reacted. The outcome being, I walk away, I've had a great time with my friends, I've had a great conversation, I've got no anxiety, I'm feeling great, I've stuck to my values, I've stuck to my beliefs. So the outcome is really positive. So you can see how that R is, how you react is going to impact your outcome. But the event, you can't change the event. The event is usually fixed or static. So and like I said, the equation's borrowed from Jack Canfield, but it really worked for me.
Yeah, that's huge. I love tools like that. I mean, yeah, it's so all about the things that, just give you the tool in the moment, because what you were saying before about just that split second to like observe and say, okay, I'm actually going to bring in the part of my brain that can make better, longer term decisions and actually consider this. And I might consider it and I might end up drinking that, like I'm not going to make this, I'm trying to just force this decision, but I'm actually going to allow my cognitive part of my brain, instead of like the animal part of my brain, to think and consider and then make a decision that feels good and is in line with myself. I find that not only with alcohol, I certainly find it, lately, strangely, I think it's sort of one of those things where you get over certain habits or addictions. And so first it was alcohol. And then, for me, it was really like looking at sort of coffee giving me so much anxiety. I still drink some, but very rarely compared to what I did before. And then now I'm finding it sort of with, food and sweets and sugar, and just having these moments of mindlessly, okay, well, forget it. I'm not going to, and how do you just insert that pause? So anyway, I love that. I think that will be really helpful, just another tool, because you never know, certain things are going to, oh yeah, that works for me. Or maybe you've heard it before, but then it finally clicks and it's just so powerful.
Exactly. And yeah, that tool's really worked for me. And like what I said, I see it's intersecting. I find it just intersecting and somewhat intercepting what would have been your old pattern or old thought behavior and changing it. So I, going back to my story. So I took to SMART. So I embraced it with a passion, and they actually asked me to come and become a SMART facilitator. So because I was extremely committed and intense, and I really immersed myself, and so I became a SMART facilitator, and now I've led over 100 sessions in the community. So it's still something I deal with, daily, and deliver weekly sessions. So it's been fantastic. But it didn't stop there, Annie. Like, I've done so much work on this. As you know, I did your courses, I did your video intensive, then I did your first ever intensive coaching course back in May. I've done Dave Andrews' 30-day sobriety intensive course. I've done Jack Canfield, Success Principles. I've done Tony Robbins. I've done yeah, I did a diploma in one. The learning does not stop, and I feel like I work on, I call it my recovery every day. So it is just immersing myself every day. It's repetition. I think it was friggin' hard work. Like, it's not easy. And this is what I tell my clients. It's like, you need to be committed to change. Um, Change is not a matter of your ability, it's a matter of your motivation. How motivated you are to change. And I was so motivated. But it was not a linear journey. Like, I probably started this probably 4 years ago, and I've had slip ups, and it's not been, I didn't have the spontaneous sobriety, like, yeah, I'm going sober and stay sober. I've had slip ups. But most of that time I have been sober, I'm on this, I call it a journey of sobriety, but I have to work hard at it still every day and be committed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's great. And I love what you say about, really continuous learning. I think it's so true. We were talking yesterday, actually, just a few of us on my team, and we were talking about this idea because I was really curious about it. This idea, you hear it said all the time, like, if you're not growing, you're dying, right? If it's not moving forward, it's moving backwards. And I was like, is that really true? Like, I'm really curious about that. I want to look that up. And what we sort of came to, and I still don't know, if this is truly scientifically true or not, but what we sort of came to is that actually there's so much, like, especially when you talk about alcohol, there's so much momentum against you in terms of, like, subconscious conditioning, all this alcohol messaging, always coming at you, that if you stop your forward momentum to do your learning, to listen to the podcast, to, engage with new teachers, to read other books, to, like, just do your own meditations, whatever, then you do just naturally sort of slide back into old patterns and habits of how much is kind of coming at us all the time, just as human beings in the culture we live in. It's such a pro-alcohol saturated culture that we have.
Certainly, yes.
Yeah, so we have to be kind of actively moving forward into this and actively going for the next thing and actively, really keeping ourselves kind of plugged in and stuff. So I think that's so important. And I also think there's something to be said that this is just really interesting to me. And again, I don't know if this is true, but this is something one of my coaches told me, is that actually humans, we have this kind of 3-month point where, and sometimes it can be less or sometimes it can be more, but if you think about getting a new car, right? Or getting a new home. Yeah. And for 3 months, it's like, whew, you're way up here. You're so happy. You're so excited. You really did it. But then it gets really baked into the new normal. So if you stop your forward progression, if you stop your forward momentum, in 3 months, your normal, where you thought you would be, which is really good, actually can slip back to where you're not satisfied or you're not happy or you don't feel as good, not because anything has changed, but because as humans, our perception very quickly shifts. Our perception of, as soon as we climb one peak and we think this is the peak, this is where I want to be, it's the career or the graduate degree or the car or whatever it is. As soon as we're at the top of that peak, guess what? We can see the higher thing behind it that we couldn't see before. Yeah. And so we always are, like, battling with this internal force that, like, literally, if we're not moving forward to some degree or we're not growing, we will be disillusioned after a certain period of time. So again, I don't know the science behind that, but I feel like it's such a fascinating topic with what you're talking about. And just,
yeah, it's exactly true. And I definitely, this is what I see with clients, is that it's that 3 month, 90 days. And I actually have seen a really good graph of this, is it starts off your commitment and your competence. Your competence is low, but your commitment is high. And what happens is that your competence starts getting higher, but your commitment actually starts off really high, but then actually starts getting lower. And that's when it hits. Your competence, if you keep on going, just starts getting higher and higher, but your commitment actually comes down at that 3 month, the research has shown that your commitment does come down at that 3-month period. But if you actually break through the 3 to 6 months, your competence and your commitment actually just keep on going linear in the same direction. So there's an exponential growth after 6 months if you just keep going through, if you keep being committed, because your competence and your commitment will then just grow. So, and that's what I see. I see because my signature program is my 90-day program, similar to yours, Anna, and because that is where you can create lasting change. And it's just after people have done that, they do get that dip. I agree. It's maintaining that motivation and not getting complacent.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have 2 more questions for you. And first of all, if people wanted to, find out or learn more about you, where can they go?
So they could go. So I actually ended up setting up a business while I saw an opportunity. I saw a lot more people like me that are looking for help. I've set up a business called Be Your Best Self, and it is primarily to help corporate workers and women to have a more healthier relationship with any addictions. Primarily it's been alcohol, but I have also looked at other things. So just trying to get a healthier relationship, and that, as you said, Annie, that doesn't necessarily mean going sober, but it's feeling like they've got a healthier relationship where it's no longer negatively impacting their lives. So for that, they can go to my website, rachelhine.com, where they can just find all the details. But it's just been great to help others that are going through the same situation, especially in the corporate sector. Working a lot with people in the corporate sector that are just struggling with the stress, the long hours, the juggling, the running a household, running the kids, coping with the stress at work, and people are trying to fill the void with alcohol, and we all know that that's not the problem. The alcohol is often the symptom. The addiction part is just a symptom. There's some negative emotion that's triggering that, and then there's some root cause behind the negative emotion. So it's looking at all of that. I call it the tree. So I see the leaves as the symptoms. So you can be, you could be the drinking, sugar, you're eating too much sugar, you're gambling, you're watching porn. That's just the symptoms. The trunk is a negative emotion. So that could be your guilt, your resentment, your anger, your fear. That's your negative emotions. And then the roots of the tree are your childhood conditioning. So that's your, whether or not you've had distress in your childhood, trauma, grief, loss. That is the root cause that's triggering these negative emotions, that's coming out as symptoms. So one of the great things I've recently done, Annie, is become a neuro-linguistic programmer, so practitioner. So you can actually address the root cause too, along with the symptoms. So I can work on helping people with the symptoms, and then once they're in a good place with the symptoms, you can then get to the root cause. Because what I was finding is that you could stop the drinking. If you just address the symptoms, you could stop the drinking, but it would come out in some other symptom. So they'd stop drinking, but then they'd be smoking heavily. Or they'd stop drinking and be drinking 10 coffees a day. So it was coming out as another symptom because we weren't addressing those negative emotions, which were getting fueled by the root cause, which is childhood conditioning.
Yeah, that's so good and so important. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So the other question that I always finish off with, if you could go back and talk to Rachel, who was, struggling and binging and really having a hard time, and just tell her, give her some hope, give her some encouragement, what would you say?
I would just say, be the real you. I think we all love Brené Brown. I see a similar role model of mine that you are, Inez, but you know, I love Brene Brown's be authentic, be vulnerable, be bold. I think being the real you, and I have found since stripping away the excessive drinking, I am the real me. This is the real me. So, you know, being authentic, I think, is key. I think understanding that that your beliefs are only a feeling of certainty rather than actually being certain. I think I always thought that my beliefs were true. Mm-hmm. And now I've learned by a lot of, you know, I really always remember what you said, go back and question your beliefs by experiencing something different, and then come back and tell me whether or not your belief is true. And so many times I did that, it wasn't true. Because I think we think our beliefs is fixed. That's it, they're true. That's my belief, you know, my belief that alcohol gives you pleasure. I thought that wine glass, that glass of wine gave me pleasure, and you know, that was what I believed. And it's not until you go and question it, and you are open to actually changing your belief, that you see that you can rewrite your beliefs, which are yours. So I think that took me a while to figure that one out.
Yeah, absolutely. So true, though. I love that.
Oh my God! And you know, you do a really good analogy around you know, around the drinking, but you know, just and you know, I keep on remembering, and one of the turning points in doing your courses was your story about the smoke alarm going off in the house, and that really I never forget that, hearing that, you know, the smoke alarm going in the house, and you still staying in the house, still staying in the house, and then the house is on fire, and you're like, yeah, right, I finally got to leave this house. And then you go away, and you look at the house and it's all burnt down, and you go, do I go back in and rebuild it, or do I actually go, and then this is where I'm going to live now? And that really stuck with me, and I think it's a great analogy, the burning house, in relating to drinking, because it's you're over here, and you're rewriting your beliefs and what you thought was to be true.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just be open. I think just be open, and nothing's, you know, don't let anything, a feeling, be certain until you've experienced it and can actually say it's certain.
Yeah, so true. That's so true. No, that's great advice for
everybody. And then my last one is just because I'm a business school, it's just, you know, live your best life and be your best self. I always, how I came up with my name is that I always used to say to myself, if I was faced with a problem or a challenge, I would say to myself, what would the best version of myself do in this moment? And I still use that a lot today, because if you think about that and you ask yourself that, the best version of you is typically not going to have a drink. Mm-hmm. The best version of you is typically going to make the right decision, because the best version of you is living a life in accordance with your values. And so that is something I always fall back on.
That's great. I love that. Such a good
yeah.
That's awesome. Well, anything else you want to share?
No, I mean, like I said, I think I just really want to share is that I can't emphasize enough how it's not a black or white. It's not black or white, and it's not a linear journey. And I think people actually, and I actually say to clients, is that see it as a journey of recovery, or journey of sobriety, or journey of changing your drinking. And that journey, even though you might have a little blip, we take a little wrong turning, you're still going in the right direction. Because I think it's that black or white, success, failure, perfect, not perfect, which can actually be quite detrimental to you changing. So realizing that it's not perfectionism we're trying to achieve, we're trying to just be on this journey of taking a step forward in the right direction, in the right direction, but knowing that we can sometimes go off track.
Absolutely. So
because
good.
I think we beat ourselves up too much, and it's that shame and that guilt and that anxiety that brings us back to that self-sabotage. So just knowing it from my journey, it's not been a straight line. So, but I still feel like I'm on the journey of sobriety.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. That's so true. Well, that's awesome. Well, it's really been a pleasure, Rachel. Thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure to finally meet you in person. And like I said, I'm a massive raving fan of yours, and your work has helped, inspired, motivated me. And so many of your analogies I use and remember and use to help others.
That's great. That's so cool. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, enjoy your morning, and we'll talk soon.
Okay. Thanks so much, Annie.
Hi, are you looking to connect with like-minded people? Sometimes maybe you feel like, as someone who knows all this information from the Naked Mind or the alcohol experiment, that you're living in a world of muggles and people just don't speak your language. That is why I created The Exchange. The Exchange is an online community where we meet face-to-face, live video calls multiple times a week with people from all over the globe, just to connect, to have somewhere you're seen and you're heard and you feel less alone, and really that you can give back and get the support you need. So if this sounds great to you, check it out at thisnakedmind.com/exchange. And as always, rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast, as it truly helps the message reach somebody who might need to hear it today.